December 9th meeting of the East Penn Board of School Directors is hereby called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is a report from the Emmaus High School Student Government Association. Ms. Maddie Kuchta and Caitlin Sensitz.
So we've had a lot of events going on at the high school recently. So Emmaus held its annual Thanksgiving Luncheon for senior citizens on November 21st, where we had a great turnout and it was enjoyed by both the students and the senior citizens that attended. Recently, we also had 24 members from our school newspaper, The Stinger, attend the National School Press Association's Fall Conference in Washington, D.C. 6 of the EHS students earned national recognition for their writing. The Symphonic Band and Jazz Band held an amazing winter concert this past Friday night, and the winter choral concerts will be held on December 12th and 13th in the auditorium at 7:30 p.m. The National Honor Society induction ceremony will be held on December 16th, where they will induct many new juniors into NHS. From December 16th to December 19th, SGA will be holding Santa pictures during all lunches, and STA will be holding a Stuff the Bus event at each school in the district for 2 days during the month of December. They will be collecting warm clothes and shoes, and the school that collects the most will get a prize.
Okay, so there's a lot going on with our athletics as well. The boys basketball team had their season opener this week, but they lost a close game to Southern Lehigh 46-41. And then they also played another game again and lost again, sadly, against Abington Heights. Our girls basketball team had their home opener and they lost, but they had they had another game and they beat Northwestern Lehigh. Our wrestling team won the Pottsville Duels 5-0, and our swim team has their first meet on December 10th against Whitehall. And our two members of our girls volleyball team, Macy Vanden Nelson and Jada Bagad, were named to the PVCA 4A All-State team. And that's all.
Do we have any questions for the student representatives? Well, thank you very much for your report. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're also welcome to go home and finish studying for classes tomorrow and get to sleep. Okay, moving on to request to address the board. I have one. I will exercise my prerogative. Since this person is outside of the district, Mr. Alan Earnshaw, on greeting and thanks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bacher. I appreciate your indulgence. And I wanted to, I'm in town for a couple of days of meetings. I thought, what better way to spend the evening after a 7-hour drive through traffic and rain than to come to a board meeting. But I wanted to come and say hello to everyone, new and old friends, and also to thank each of you for your service on the board. It's long hours of preparation, of meetings, sometimes drudgery, sometimes exhilaration when we watch the accomplishments of our students. But I appreciate all the effort that each of you make to make this school district a success. Thank you, and congratulations for those who have just been seated for new terms.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Moving on to approval of minutes, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Now approval of minutes for the December 3rd meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have a performance.
Yes, this will be one of those moments of exhilaration about which Mr. Earnshaw spoke.
That's why you came. I was expecting a presentation. That's fantastic.
Did I hear that the winter concert is
December
Thursday?
12th and 13th, yes.
Is that Thursday and Friday?
I can't read what.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I just couldn't read them. Thank you.
So I believe we are incredibly fortunate to have Fermata Nowhere joining us this evening to help us as a school community kick off the winter holiday season. As you know, this is an incredibly talented group of student performers who literally have held the national and international stage. And the fact that we were able to have them come out and join us on a Monday evening, the fact that they're available, and we're very fortunate and appreciative of their time. And of course, I also wanted to take a moment to recognize our director, Ms. Rita Cortez, who just does a phenomenal job musically, educationally, as well as just building really incredibly powerful relationships with kids. Ms. Cortez, is there anything you'd like to say before they get started? Not really. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us.
On the first day of Christmas, won't you look into me, a partridge in a pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, won't you look into me, 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. On the fourth day of third day of Christmas, won't you look into me, 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, French 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. On the ninth day of Christmas, won't you look into Christmas, 9 days, 8 days, 11, 7 days, 6 days, and God, you better not shout, you better not cry, you better not in a pear tree. On the ninth day, no. On the eighth, no. On the second, the house of holly, 7 tons of 6 geese, a leg of 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French, and 2 turtle doves. The horse has and their eye, decked with base and partridge in a pear tree. On the 11th day of Christmas, won't you look into me?
Oh my gosh.
5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. On the 12th day of Christmas, I had a little dreidel. I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, it's Christmas. 1, 2, 3, 4. I had a little dreidel. I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel out of clay. Oh, dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. Oh, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel out of clay. Mazel tov! On the 12th day of Christmas, won't you look into me? On the 12th day, won't you look into me? 12 droppers strumming like Olympus above the Serengeti. 11 vipers climbing, 10 boys leaving. 5 dancing queen. 8 maids of milking, they were milking just for me. I had Christmas down in Africa. 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 To the ghettos and to the things we never had. Partridge in a big pear tree. Partridge in a big pear tree. And a partridge in a pear tree.
Wow, that was amazing and inventive.
That's why Alan came tonight.
Or did they sing for him? Okay, moving on. We have some, I'm sure, equally as enjoyable presentations.
Yes, I think we might ask them to start off with a little song as well. I first would like to welcome Jamie Lynch, who's the principal and senior project manager for Dewey Engineering. And the board will likely recall that Jamie was with us in July of 2019 to share with the board and the community an update with regard to our EHS turf project. And so Jamie again is joining us this evening as promised to continue to provide the board with an update in terms of the work that's been done since July, and to give you a sense as to where the project is going this spring in anticipation of that new turf field this summer.
And in two-part harmony, yes.
Perfect.
So I'm all set when you are.
Close to you. Okay.
Getting brighter. Works.
Great. Good one.
That looks pretty good. Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy holidays. Yes, I'm back to just give you a brief update on the Stadium Turf Project, and with your permission, we'll be ready to put this project out to bid. So pretty much everything that I'll show you tonight, it should be familiar from back in July, but I'm here to let you know that we are ready to go with a turf project and a track resurfacing project. All is well with respect to approvals and all the necessary hoops to jump through in order to get this project pushed away from the dock. Just briefly, the project has not really changed in detail. We have a recoating of the track surface and a new synthetic turf field on the site of the existing stadium project. The only difference from what we have now out there is with synthetic turf. Obviously, we can't have the throwing events out here in the middle of a turf field, so they'll be moved up to the old softball field at the bottom left of the screen. We've got the sponsorship from Lehigh Valley Health Network. Their logos have been approved. We've met with them, and Steve's met with them on a couple of occasions, and so they're fully behind the project in how it looks and obviously also financially. So there's an image of the throwing events for javelin, discus, and shot up on the softball field and their related venues. That'll be part of the project. Just briefly with respect to schedule, since we saw you in July, we've completed the submittal to the Lehigh County Conservation District. They've completed their administrative review. They're in the midst of their technical review. The stormwater associated with the project has been reviewed without comment by them. We're looking for their erosion and sediment control final review. We expect to have that. I kind of conservatively put January and February, but it could actually come before the Christmas holiday. There was no required permitting in Upper Milford Township. There was not a land development process required by Emmaus Borough, but because we have a scoreboard associated with the project, there's a waiver that's required to their zoning requirements that we're working through now. So we would expect to have that shortly after the new year as well, associated with the lights and the signage that makes up a scoreboard. And so as a result, I'm pleased to say that we're actually able to get out to bid a little earlier than I had anticipated. We would advertise for the first time on Monday next week, make contract documents available to contractors before the end of the year, and I'm looking at a bid due date of January 17th. And then we would bring those bids back to this room for you to consider as far as moving the project forward. One of the things that I've been strategizing with is 2020, I think I mentioned it in July, is the year of turf fields in school districts in Pennsylvania. There are a lot of them. And we find ourselves wedged between two projects at Council Rock, a project up at Whitehall, a returfing project at Salisbury, and easily 30 other turf projects in eastern Pennsylvania. So it's nice that we were able to get through the design process, through the permitting process, and get this out early. We had a pre-bid conference for another project last week, and there were 15 contractors at that pre-bid meeting. Usually there's only a handful, so there's some more firms that are getting into the market, as obviously this market for turf fields is growing. So again, as a result, we're ready to advertise and put this job on the street. We've also done some work in examining the schedule for execution. My charge by you has really been to find ways in which we can add value to the project. That doesn't mean increase the cost, but get better bang for the buck. So I've been working hard with the school district on the exact schedule, the precise schedule for the delivery of the project. With the school district's help, we should be able to start to break ground by May 5th of next year, which is an early jump ahead of the end of the track season. Finish up for the first home football game with the turf field. And depending on how we resurface the track, my plan of attack there is not to require the contractor to have the track resurfaced for the first football game, but to do it in between football games in the fall. And that draws out the schedule a little bit for the completion of the project, but after all, we don't need a track resurfaced for the first game. All of those things are attractive to the contractor because he'll come in and he'll build the turf field first. And while he's making all that mess, he certainly doesn't want to recoat the track and make it nice and then make it messy again as he's building the field. So these are all things that are really an advantage to the contractor. The other point to make is that the contract is relatively straightforward. It really literally is a turf field and recoating, whereas some of these other projects that you've seen advertised have fencing, have bleachers, have field house, have concessions. That makes it more complex, brings in more subcontractors. So this is going to be a desirable project when it does go out on the field, out for public bid. And there's a very good chance that contractors who are looking at this project are also looking at Whitehall and may endeavor to do both. Whitehall's on a slightly different schedule. Their turf field would be installed in the spring because it's their exclusive football field that they use. So the fact that both of these projects are out is probably going to be good for both of them, actually. I know the public can't read my massive spreadsheet here as far as the budget goes. There really aren't any changes here as far as the overall budget. We're still looking at a project that is in the $1.9 million range. What we've done is craft bid alternates that we will include in the bid process, and I'll explain them in detail when the numbers come in, but there's a number of different ways that I can try to make the scope of work without reducing the scope a little bit cheaper. And so we want to see what the bid allowances show, give you the opportunity to take the very low price, and if there's a couple of bid alternates that want to be added in, you have the opportunity to take them as well. I'll focus a little bit on the scoreboard and the track resurfacing because this is kind of an example of what we've tried to do, as I said, to add value. You'll see the image of the track scoreboard in just a moment, but as far as the budget here, we have a scoreboard quote on state contract that you see represented there down to the last dollar for the new scoreboard. And the structural steel, the electrical, and the new foundation for that scoreboard would be included in our bid price. One thing that this does, it really expedites the scoreboard delivery to the site and allows our contractor to do what he's best at, which is build with concrete and steel. And that way there's not a markup for the general contractor on the scoreboard. And that scoreboard price is already negotiated through the state contract. It's a Nevco scoreboard, if anyone is familiar. Very well recognized scoreboard that's in many of the Lehigh Valley stadiums. As far as synthetic track surface, there'll be two options for the board to consider. First, with the track being installed relatively recently, we've had two track companies come out and take a look at it, and a simple recoating is possible to give the existing track another, they call it 8 to 10 years of service for you. So instead of removing all of the polyurethane down to asphalt, one option is to recoat and reline the track. And that number is substantially less than removing all of the polyurethane product. So we'll bid it as an alternate, see how the numbers come in. And then we also have a notion to look at the track recoating on state contract. Once again, it's already a negotiated price through the state contract. The general contractors aren't doing that. They're going to a company who provides that coating, who installs that coating. And so this is one way to reduce that general contract markup on the price. So we'll have to take a look and see what the bids tell us versus what the state contract numbers show us, and then make a decision based on those numbers. Here's a look at the scoreboard. It really remains unchanged since I saw you in July. Has an LED banner in the middle. That's the American flag that's represented there. I mentioned new foundations in the bid process. The existing stadium sound system will remain. We'll provide a power source, and then we have the quote for state contract. This is a scoreboard that is controlled wirelessly, so that's certainly a convenience for the school district as far as having to run new conduits all over the field so that you have control of the scoreboard. And the last relates to stadium field lighting. You've gotten some information, certainly, and a long history on the lights that are out there. What's represented in this slide in the dotted yellow line is the existing conduits, which are underground that serve the existing light poles. What we know we'll find as we go across this field is that that yellow line is relatively shallow. So I'm going to put a bid alternate in that does two things. If that line is so shallow that it'll be interrupted by the base that we install, we'll have to put in new conduits for the lights. But the other thing is when the lights are ultimately replaced, and at some point they will be, there aren't suitable conduits under the field now in order to accommodate the new conductors. And so we want to put some empty conduits in regardless. But again, I'll bid it as an alternate so that we see what the price is on bid day and we can make a decision at that time. And that way you have flexibility. So next steps, advertise and bid due January 17th. We expect the NPDS permit from the Conservation District in January. We'll continue to work with you and the borough on the scoreboard waivers to get those approved so that the ordering of the scoreboard could commence. I mentioned that we've got our bidding schedule set up so that we are in between a lot of the other fields that are bidding so that we don't have two projects that are bidding simultaneously. A benefit to the scoreboard is that it can be started before track season based on its location. So in the spring, if the contractor wanted to go out and excavate the foundations for the scoreboard, he could do that without impact to track. And our excavation in bulk would start on or about May 5th. And we would be complete with turf for the first home game, and we'd squeeze the track resurfacing in between home games if necessary. If we have a great weather summer and there's hardly any rain, that'd be great. We could get the field in faster, we could get the track resurfaced. But I think this is a great way to have a contingency plan in order to get the track resurfaced after the field is done and you're using it. So with that, questions, comments?
Ms. Bowman?
Yes, I appreciate the contingency, that's not the right word, but the alternate bids. I appreciate that you're asking for those. And I am wondering if you could maybe look into or potentially add one of keeping the existing scoreboard, but doing something to it to still have us be in good standing with the deal that we did with the hospital. I don't know if that's possible, maybe it's not, and that's why we're not doing it. I'm not interested in having the best football field in the valley, I just am interested in having a safe football field. Mm-hmm. So to me, if there's nothing wrong with our current scoreboard, and if there is something wrong with it, and I don't know that's a piece of information I could use, but assuming that it works, I would love to see if there's a way we can keep it and then just add something LVHN to it per the deal, assuming that LVHN agrees with that method. Maybe they don't. And then the other one that I was curious about is having fewer logos on the field. When I was looking at the other school fields, they didn't have as many logos, and this isn't something that I would have ever thought to suggest until I saw how much logos cost. And so I don't know how the other board members feel, but I would really be happy if we didn't have the Hornet in the middle, for example. Just going on the cost of these things. Obviously, it has to say Emmaus somewhere. So, and if there are other things that could happen that would get this down to the actual cost, the actual donation amount versus, I think we're 700,000 above that right now. I'm not sure. That I would appreciate that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Bacher, Could I just comment on
Okay.
the overage? At this point, the amount is 288,000.
Okay, what is the donation amount? I might be remembering it wrong.
The donation is, it was a $1 million donation.
Yeah.
There was $400,000 of athletic trainer savings that we were
Oh, okay,
including, so it
somebody's
was
being moved. This is where I'm
1.4.
confused. Okay,
Okay, and then there was a $50,000 signing bonus, so 1.45.
okay,
Okay, and that was for the sign and the scoreboard, I'm sorry, and the field.
okay,
The track was something we had had in the capital plan as a separate item.
okay.
Which is why we've asked Mr. Lynch to separate those here so that you
Okay.
can see the different costs.
So when you add those two together, are we exactly where we wanted to be, or are we over?
When you add all of those, you come up with $1,665,000
Okay.
was the anticipated cost,
Okay.
budget cost. And right now, the presentation is showing 1.953.
Okay.
Okay? And the difference is 288,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Champagne?
Yeah, I just had a question on the scoreboard. I remember you saying that we could get a deduct for the digital display if we wanted to. We didn't have to go with the digital display in the scoreboard?
Gotcha. The
LED.
LED banner, which is
That
the
was-
American flag,
Yeah.
that could be removed from the scoreboard. And I would
An
have to
alternate?
pull up the quote to tell you what the cost was.
I thought it was like,
It's a state contract, so it's a.
can we bid it as an alternate?
Anything that's on the scoreboard could be struck. You could purchase it without the LED banner. So.
The state contract, so it's not, right? That's a state
Exactly.
contract.
So we're buying this on the state contract, and you could just draw a line through that and tell the vendor that you don't want the LED banner.
Yeah,
And that has an associated amount with it that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Already
we-
pre-negotiated with the state.
Yes, and we can get that number, like everything that you see here is a line item in their quote, and so you can draw a line right through.
Yeah, because I remember
those
that
items.
coming up the last meeting, and I just wanted to make sure we're taking a look at that as, if we don't want it, and we don't need it, you have the right to get rid of it, so, okay, thank you.
I think that the way to do that is when the bids come in, we come back and we have all the other numbers. Here's the state contract, and if you want to fiddle, I'll say it that way, with what we actually purchased for the scoreboard, because we would sign that state contract purchase order very shortly thereafter to get it into production. You'd be able to draw a line through the banner or the truss. The truss that's on the top is also an option.
Yeah, that's what I remember, and I just want to make sure we still have that flexibility. It sounds like we do. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, a couple things. I'd like to thank Ms. Bowman for bringing up the logo concern. I had brought that up last time. I noticed that the LVHN logos were still on the field, and I kind of wrote it off as that was just something that rose to a certain level of importance for me, but not everyone else, and I was willing to be okay with that. But if we're going to take a look at the logos, I'd like to take a look at the, as long as we're not breaking any contracts, the LVHN logos that are within the boundaries of play. That's not my main point in speaking, though. I had a quick question, going back to the resurfacing slide. I don't know if I'm not looking at the most current version, but if it's been updated since Saturday,
It has.
It has, okay.
Yes.
So can we have just the most updated version shared with us? Just because there's a couple of bid alternates there down at the bottom that I'm seeing on the screen now that I don't see in front of me.
Absolutely. Those are my changes.
Okay.
Getting ready for tonight.
It's not a big deal, I just wanted to make sure.
So you have the most current copy.
Right. You had mentioned something about, I think you called it the summer of turf installations and the number of installations that are going on in the area. You mentioned that, and I almost was wondering if I'm reading between the lines, like there's some level of impact in terms of the number of fields and how it might impact our project. Is that the surplus of fields that are being put out to bid in the area, is that going to impact a number of factors: cost, timeline, quality of contractor that we're going to have to work on our project, do you see the abnormal number of other fields impacting us, good, bad, otherwise, in any way, shape, or form?
So it's a great question. First, because of the number of fields and what the vendors do, I do worry about a cost increase simply because of the volume of work that's out there. The turf manufacturers are putting turf, all over the place. So they're the ones who are dictating the price. In order to combat that, we have 4 comparable vendors listed in the spec that the contractors can go to for their turf. So because of market conditions, I don't have a whole lot of control over that, other than to get it out as quickly and as early as I can. So that'll be an attractive thing. The other thing that I tried to relay is that this is an attractive project to contractors because it doesn't have all the other stadium stuff. So North Penn just bid a bleacher, track, synthetic turf, field house, sidewalk, roadway, all of that stuff. Here, we got to put a field in. We got to call the AT&T or one of the other vendors to come in and recoat. So it's a straightforward project that doesn't have complications. We modified the construction timeframe to get them onto the field a little early, May 5th, as opposed to after track season, which is pretty common in most other school districts, so we give them an advantage there. And then on the back end, we did what we did with the track coating and told them, you don't have to be done for the first football game. I just want all my lines, all my numbers, I want the field done so we can have our first opening game. And all of those things, I believe, help and make it better for the contractor. What I can't offset is, what are the turf guys gonna do to us as far as a number goes? It's a straightforward project. There's a number of contractors who are specifically interested in East Penn and Whitehall and the timing that's there, and they'll go after them hard, I know.
Thank you.
Ms. Winch?
I just wanted, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. I just wanted to echo the concern for the cost of the symbols on the field, as well as the LED screen. I am too not interested in the best field. I want a safe field, and being $300,000 over, so to speak, I don't think that's a good starting spot. So I wanted to echo that just a little bit. And I just wanted to also say, I went ahead and I did some investigating on what the other fields around the Lehigh Valley really look like. They don't look like this at all. And they're much dimmed down. And so I think we can come down a little bit without feeling we're subpar. And I also, because I don't have the historic knowledge, what is LVHN requiring us as far as sponsorship on the field itself and on the scoreboard? What do they want from us? And as they should get some sponsorship visibility, but what are they requiring of us?
Well, I'll let Bob and Steve chime in. What I understand is the logos that are represented here are the result of a meeting that the school district had with them. It's not any different than several other Lehigh Valley Health Network fields that have been installed. They've been relatively modest with their request here.
I agree. I just want to know what our requirements are and making sure we're meeting them.
And then I don't believe we have an obligation on the scoreboard. We show that the image that was there was just to provide an image of the scoreboard. The LVHN logo is there. I don't believe we have an obligation there, but we can clarify that for you.
Thank you.
Just to a couple of your points, as far as logos and letters. So just to help out, it says Emmaus and Hornets in the end zones. That's a bid alternate. So you could have those letters, you could not have those letters. The Lehigh Valley Health Network logos are not a bid alternate at this time, and we're more than happy to go back and speak with LVHN after the bids come in and let them know, and we can discuss what the needs may be. The one change that we made as we were in the discussions is we took the word Lehigh Valley Health Network off the field, and they were agreeable and acceptable to just having the pinwheel logo that's on the field, so that toned down a little bit. One other bid alternate that we're doing is the D zones, which are at the end of the oval. We're bidding the construction of those Ds, and that's asphalt with a polyurethane track coating on top of it as a bid alternate. All right, so they could go away in favor of green synthetic turf, and we would recoat the existing jumps runways that we have outside of the track. So that's another cost-saving measure that we'll bid as an alternate. Now, if we want to have no logo, I can bid that as an alternate at the center of the field, if that's the direction that you want to go. Happy to do that. With respect to your comment about other fields, this red track that you're getting as far as the coating is the exact same color red track at every other track in the Lehigh Valley.
I wasn't referring to the track, I was referring to the logos.
Oh, the logos.
I apologize.
Okay, very good, understood. As far as the field goes, there's nothing out of the ordinary as far as the green color. It is a two-tone color. You can see that in the slide here. There's not an additional cost associated with the two-tone color that I'm aware of. So, what we've tried to do is put it together as effectively as we can. But I think that the direction I would ask for tonight is if we want to bid the center field logo as an alternate, happy to do it. It's easy. It's a pen stroke.
I would say yes, but I don't know.
Is there a potential cost to the project?
To make it an alternate?
Having it as an alternate?
No, not at all. It's a pen stroke on my behalf. It's easy. So you would see what the cost is of the end zone letters and the center logo as bid alternates on bid day. You could decide that.
Are there any other comments?
Oh, I just wanted to know if there is a relevancy to the red on the Lehigh Valley Health Network, because they're blue and green. And so I was just kind of confused by the red in it. I don't know, maybe it's just turf. I don't understand. I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, the red.
The red in the D areas, for lack of a better term, after the end zone where it says Lehigh Valley Health Network, it's all red.
So the track is all one surface.
Okay. So it's part of the track. That's
Right,
what
that's all track surface. So the athletes are on, to the right of the screen is where the high jump is.
Okay.
The half circle for the high jump would be down there, and on the left side, you have pole vault and the jumps runways for
I see. Thank you.
long and triple.
Dr. Munson?
Yes, one question I have is in terms of the timing. So you've moved up the timing, and it says here that you're not going to disrupt the end of the track season. But how, can you give us a little bit of detail on how they plan to move in all of that, how you do significant excavation while not disrupting the track?
So what I mean to say is that the last portion of track season after May 5th, which would ordinarily be here if the kids are getting ready to compete for states, they're getting moved to a different venue.
Okay, so the plan is that they're not there.
Right.
And then the other question I had, I don't actually think it's for you, Mr. Lynch, but for those who were involved in the project with LVHN, are we at all responsible for these logos if and when LVHN changes their name, changes their ownership, changes their logo colors? Or would that be, they would have to pay for that on our field?
We are not responsible. That was something we specifically thought about in advance.
Thank goodness.
Thank you.
Mr. Jankowski, did you have a comment from earlier?
This is for my own education. So the state contract, how does that work for the signs?
So there's multiple state contracts that school districts have at their disposal to use for pre-negotiated goods and services. And I can go to state contract, and several of the manufacturers, for instance, who do the track resurfacing are on that state contract with pre-negotiated figures. Also, the turf manufacturers are on that state contract, and you can purchase turf on a state contract. Some other school districts have been using the state contract to construct the entire field. I go so far as saying if I'm recoding a track with a specialized process and I need a specialized subcontractor, that's a great use of the state contract because it's been there, and Pennsylvania and many other organizations have pre-negotiated what it costs for a track to be recoded. One contractor comes in, he does that job. The alternative method that some folks are doing, it's a means to an end for procurement, to hire the turf manufacturers to build your field on state contract, and they will give you the price, not only for the turf, but for the specialized stone base underneath, for all the excavation of the stormwater, all of that. But that component underneath the turf is not something that is pre-negotiated on the state contract. And that's why I favor putting it out for public bid, where the contractors who do that work on a regular basis under roads, under buildings, et cetera, who do it all the time, can go after it. And then the turf manufacturers, they go after each other as far as how low they want to go for East Penn's project. And so there's a balancing act. How do you use a state contract to so it's effective in executing the work well with a recognized subcontractor and performing in a timely manner? So I can go on state contract, for instance, on the recoding and say, my plan is we're going to be done with the field for the first home football game, and then here's the schedule of the football games. I want your price to be based on working in between. And when I recoat the track, it takes 3 to 4 good weather days, and that's all he has to give a price for. So when I'm going to those vendors now in December and January, they're booking their summer work. Again, it's an attractive project. They put it, they pretty much put it in their pocket. But I like it because of the specialized nature of the track recoding. Is that?
No, that's very helpful, thanks. Now, with respect to the turf contractors, you mentioned, the volume of turf fields being put in place and Whitehall and the timing. I mean, is there any thought about a cooperative with the school districts and, to try to get a price reduction from these turf contractors that you've got X number of school districts, the volume, we want a better price.
In concept, fantastic idea. In concept, that's essentially what the state contracts are. It is a cooperative purchasing agreement that's been made by the state. Bob's an expert in this, I'm not. But those pre-negotiated numbers are good to go by. But once again, I go back to, the pre-negotiated number for purchasing the turf, great. I got it. I know exactly what that number is. It's all the work under the turf that is it's normal construction. And
so the 380 includes all the work that corresponds with the installation of the turf?
Yes, I have it broken down on the one slide. So there's excavation, there's stormwater, there's under drains, I have conduit, I have a water line that I'm dealing with. So all of that is a part of it. Now, the other thing is some districts go state contract for the turf itself, and they purchase the turf. And then the rest they bid. Okay, now the turf guy comes in to lay his carpet, and he says, the subgrade, the stone, it's not compacted the way I like it. I don't like what your guy did. Now all of a sudden I got people pointing fingers. The way we've done it here, I've got single point of responsibility on recoding your track, and single point of responsibility with a general contractor who's going to build the turf. So from a risk management standpoint, I like that better than breaking it up into too many pieces. I'll buy the scoreboard directly from the vendor, right? That there's a certain amount of risk protection that you have in doing that, and then leaving everything else to your general contractor.
Now going with the state contract, is that already a predetermined contract itself? Or is there any opportunity to negotiate the terms of the contract?
I think there's always opportunity to negotiate. So when when numbers come in, I just try to find out, where can I go to make it easier for that particular vendor to give you a better price or better value. So that's the benefit of the state contract, is that you can negotiate a little bit. With public bid, you obviously can't.
And I know I'm jumping ahead here, but one of my concerns would be, considering the timeline, and to the point that there are a number of projects, a large volume of projects going on during the same time period, and to ensure, to the extent we can, that this project is completed prior to the first football game, building in some form of liquidated damages or something that at least protects us from a monetary perspective, for anything, obviously whatever negotiated rate that may be, just so that there are penalties and protections in place to incentivize the contractor to complete it as expeditiously as possible, as well as compensating us for any time delays.
It's a great point, and we could work with and discuss with the solicitor the merits of liquidated damages clauses. To set them artificially high is.
I'm not suggesting that. I mean, I'm just saying that there is some form.
It can't be a penalty.
Right.
Right? So on a turf, let's talk turf projects.
Yeah, my use of penalty was, that was incorrect. But more our damages, a proper measure of our damages.
So I think the decision that we've made is, if for some reason he's unable to finish, you have direct damages that you would go after him for, as opposed to liquidated damages. And again, I go with the solicitor's advice here. I think your actual damages are more likely to be achieved or received back from the contractor than, a healthy fight over LDs.
Yeah, and that's something
real
we
issue
can
is
take up at that point. I won't negotiate a contract here, but
if we push LDs on someone, that affects that contractor's bonding company, and so he usually, it really gets his dander up. But direct damages, he can handle.
Yeah. And then just for a point where I agree, I think, to the extent that a new scoreboard is not necessary, I don't know that the cost justifies putting a new scoreboard in at this time. So that's all I have.
Dr. Levinson?
The question I had was, if we were to get a new scoreboard and if we eliminate the LED banner, does that eliminate any way to put messaging on the scoreboard? Or is there an alternative that's cheaper than LED banner?
Like the letters that you put?
The existing scoreboard in the stadium right now does have an illuminated messaging area so that they can put messages up for sponsors and things like that. So the sketch or the image that's on the presentation right now, I would imagine the LED banner would take that role.
So the LED banner is a standalone purchase item.
Right.
And so, for instance, you could purchase an LED banner for the existing scoreboard.
Mhm.
So I think the answer to your question is yes, but there's really not another means that I'm aware of on how you could do electronic messaging without having the LED banner up there. I've seen more expensive ways to do it, jumbotrons and things like that.
Right, where's the picture?
But we can certainly ask the question of the scoreboard manufacturers to see if they could
Yeah,
give us some thoughts.
I think that's on the slide just before this one. At the top of the scoreboard, there's a different way to eliminate messages.
A message banner there.
A message
Right.
banner is LED. That seems to me like that'd be a less expensive way to do it.
So it's an issue of scale. I think the one that's up there now is rather narrow.
Correct.
This one is 4 feet.
That would be much larger. Yeah.
So it looks like that one that's up there now might be 2 feet
Yeah.
in size. So this one is bigger.
18 inches.
18 inches? It sounds like somebody's been through a zoning battle.
Just that I met with Mr. Anushko earlier this afternoon regarding
Okay.
the variant issue.
So not 2 feet, but 18 inches.
I'm just saying, in the eventuality, if we still come to agreement that we'll get a new scoreboard, I still think having some messaging is going to be important for the game, so maybe that's an alternate as opposed to the LED banner.
And if I could also add, I appreciate the discussion about the scoreboard. I did just want to remind the board that the scoreboard is specifically mentioned in our agreement with LVHN, that the first project is the installation of a new scoreboard at the football stadium. So again, that was negotiated as part of the initial agreement.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes, you mentioned the cost of, not the cost, the life of the track with the resurfacing. What is based on the bid you're going to put out for the lifetime of the turf? Is that related to the price, or you have some numbers that you could share with us?
So the turf manufacturers, all of them, typically provide either an 8-year warranty or a 10-year warranty. We'll be specifying a 10-year warranty. And then the life of the turf depends, of course, on the amount of play on that turf. So you have experience with Memorial Field and how long that field lasted before it was replaced. One of the other longest lasting fields in the Lehigh Valley was over at Bethlehem's Liberty Stadium. And that list lasted 12 years and arguably gets the most play of any of the turf fields here in the Lehigh Valley. So warranty for 10 is what we'll specify. And depending on level of play, it'll probably last longer than that.
Thank you.
Are there people that haven't gone the first time? Okay. Ms. Bowman?
I forgot to ask this, and before I even ask it, I will say that it's like on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being like super important, this is about a 10. It's my understanding that there's certain types of lights that are give off more light pollution than others, and given that we're a district that teaches astronomy, I am wondering, before we put in LEDs, if we can make sure we're putting in the kind that don't give off the you can't see the stars pollution. It's my understanding it's a very simple difference. That's the extent of my knowledge on this subject. But I just was hoping we could look into it before we go that route.
Okay, we know we're not putting stadium lights in as a part of the project,
No, this is
right?
just for the scoreboard.
For the scoreboard?
Yeah.
Okay. So the light emitting diode fixtures for the scoreboard are different than the lights near my house at Sioka Subaru that light up the sky at night. Anyone familiar? So it's just a different process. Will they be bright, on the scoreboard so that you can see them from over on Pine Street, or we'll have to talk about the zoning requirements? Yes, you'll see them from over there. Will they be brighter than the scoreboard is now? I imagine they will be. Will it be a nuisance to the neighbors? Everything is in the eye of the beholder. But if you've gone to any of the other football games at any of the other stadiums, I don't think that you necessarily find that the scoreboard is something that is too bright. LED banner aside, with what happens on the LED banner, sure. With, if it's the flag that's waving or the scrolling of the words. In some places, the zoning change or the zoning variance that's been granted says no scrolling words, no movement. You can say touchdown, and that's it. So I've seen it happen all different sorts of ways.
Okay. Actually, what I was talking about, I'll have to look it up, and maybe I can send it later. It wasn't about the brightness. It's a type of light, which is maybe more expensive for all I know, but and I'm mostly thinking of, given, obviously the overhead lights and other lights are giving off more, but those aren't not the ones that we're replacing right now. So I just think it would be a smart practice for us as a district to do things that are within what our students are learning, if that makes sense. So I'll send it. Maybe
And I'm happy to gather that information, what this vendor provides, so that you're aware of what their technology is.
Okay.
Other questions? Naomi?
I just have a quick request. When we do get the LED as a line item in terms of the price tag, could we also find out how much money we are making or taking in when we do have advertisers on there? That way we might find a cost reason to have an LED screen if we're getting so many more sponsorships, so to speak.
Mr. Smith?
Can we use that LED part for advertising? Is that, because you mentioned the difference in variances in different local municipalities, so flashing, not flashing, scrolling, not scrolling.
Unless we heard something from a borough ordinance that somehow objected to advertising on that
in our
banner.
policy, we have policies on
Right,
advertising.
Right. And just as a point of information, due to the magic of the internet, while the discussion was going on, I was able to take a look at, thanks to our friend Google Maps, some of the, I think I got all of them, all the fields in the area, and from best I could tell, as far as it relates to the logos in the center of the field, I could not find more than 3 local districts that did not have the logo at the center of the field. And those three, I think, were not turf field. I think they were still natural turf. And that includes the field where Allen and Deeref play. They have the Allentown School District logo on their center. So if we chose to go forward by eliminating the logo in the center of the field, we would be in the very, very small minority of districts in the area that did not have a logo in the center of the field.
Well, the stuff that I have seen, I apologize for going on a term, but sometimes they had a logo, sometimes they didn't have it on the end zone. It's very variable throughout. I made a little cheat sheet for myself, but it's very variable is all I'm saying.
Any other comments? To provide direction, I know there were a couple people that said they wanted the bid alternate for the center logo, and probably Adam was arguing against it. Are there any other people that want to just quickly, maybe show of hands, how many would be interested in a bid alternate for the center logo separately?
Well, just point of information. My understanding is it is trivially easy to do it that way.
Yeah.
Correct? At no cost?
Yeah, I'm just seeing, is there anyone that, I mean, we could ask it any other way, but maybe I'll ask it that way. Is there anyone that objects to having that as an alternate and making the decision later? So yeah, I guess we'll have it as an alternate on the...
Okay, you got it. Easily done.
No more questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good holiday. We'll see you shortly after the new year.
Great, thank you. And next up, we have PA Future Ready Index Overview.
Yes,
Would you like to
while Mr.
introduce?
Kovalitis transitions and gets set up, just a quick reminder to the community. In November of 2018, Pennsylvania, PDE released the Future Ready PA Index, which was, in essence, the state's way of being in compliance with ESSA, and that accountability piece in terms of a variety of measures to indicate the effectiveness of schools. And so we'll have an opportunity tonight to give you a high-level overview, almost an executive summary of the Future Ready Index for the most recent school year, which was released in October of 2019, which in essence is really a reflection of looking back at that 2018-19 data. And when we talk about those measures of a school's progress, you'll hear tonight that some of those measures are certainly closely tied to standardized assessments, such as the Keystone exam, the PSSAs at the elementary and middle level. There are also college and career ready benchmark standards that we'll talk about, attendance rates. This tool was intended to be, the intention was intended to be much more robust in terms of looking at a variety of measures that indicate how well a school is performing. And so, again, Mr. Kovalitis is going to take us through a high-level overview in terms of some of the preliminary analysis that we've been able to do as a school team, what that information is telling us in terms of areas of strength, areas that we've noted as need for continued growth, and what our general plans are in terms of addressing those needs.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll dive right in here. So if you look up on the screen, the first thing that I think is important is to differentiate the ways that the Future Ready PA Index scores and the way that they use scoring, because it can be confusing. So the first way is using the 2030 goal for achievement. So for example, standardized tests, there's a 2030 goal. The way that goal was determined is the baseline year was 2017. What they did is looked at the percentage of non-proficient students in 2013 in each of the subject areas, and said we're going to reduce that by 50% by 2030. So then you have incremental targets from 2017 all the way through 2030, where that's the goal, okay? And so you'll see this 2030 goal throughout the index. The blue means that goal is already achieved. The 2030 goal is already achieved. Green means that you're on your way there. You're hitting the targets on the way to the 2030 goal, and red means you're not quite there yet. Academic growth score. So there is a much more robust assessment system called the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. PVAS helps with growth scores. So what PVAS provides a lot of very in-depth reports that go into multiple years of data. However, what the Future Ready PA Index does is it pulls in just some of that information, give you a general overview of where your growth is from one standardized test to the next, or multiple standardized tests if a student's in 5th grade, for example, the 3rd grade PSSA, 4th grade PSSA. Both of those data points would be used to determine in 5th grade, are they making growth that this PVAS system, which is very valid, is used to determine if appropriate growth is made. Blue exceeds the standard for growth determined by that system. Green meets the standard for growth, and then red does not meet that standard. Then there's also performance standards, for example, attendance and career standards benchmarks. This is more of a norm referenced process. So they'll look at like a 25th percentile, 75th percentile cutoff based on the baseline year. And so if you're above the 25th percentile, you're meeting the performance standard and so on and so forth, but it's more of a norm referenced approach. And the fourth one is informational, and it's really just that. All right, it just provides you with a percent advanced on state assessments, for example. So if it's 20%, it's simply 20%. So it provides more information to the community and, of course, to the school district to provide change and look at that and see kind of how we're performing. In addition to those 4 scoring measures, there's also arrows that are used, and the arrows going up shows that there's an increase in performance from the previous year. Arrow going down shows there's a decrease from the previous year. If it's just a fill-in circle, it means that it shows the same performance. The problem with this, or an area of weakness for this, is it's only 1 year. So you can look at other measures. Fortunately, our team has a lot of data that we use and analyze that goes back several years. So you can look at the longitudinal trends, because oftentimes 1 year up or 1 year down doesn't tell the whole picture and doesn't tell you about multiple years. However, what's nice about this, and when you look at the arrows, you have to know that they're telling you 2 things. If it's the color is a blue arrow, it's telling you whatever that particular scoring is being used, and also how it compared to the previous year. So, for example, here, let's see if. So looking here if you can't read it, it says percent proficient advanced in English language arts. This happens to be one of our elementary schools, so I just took a screenshot here. So if you look here, the green would say that we are on target, going back to the 2030 goal, we're on target for meeting proficiency in ELA in this particular school, but it went down from the previous year. The next one here would talk about academic growth. I talked about the PVAS system. That would say that the academic growth is in the red. It's not meeting the growth standard in ELA. So up here it says the proficiency level, the way students are scoring, meets the target. Overall proficiency level went down from the previous year. Here it's saying the growth is not meeting the standard for growth for all students taking this assessment, and it also went down from the previous year. So moving on to math, the same example. And here, the good news here for growth would be it's not only blue, but also going up. And that's, of course, the best you can have. Moving over to on-track measures. So here's percent regular attendance, for example. You have blue here for, so this is a performance standard, and so it exceeds the performance standard, so it's blue. Here's percent of English language growth and attainment. Is insufficient amount of students in this particular area, and so there's nothing recorded there. If there was, what this measures is there's a assessment that all students that are English learners take each year, and there's a certain growth expectation from 1 year to the next that they take on that access test. And so what we hope is that those students are making the appropriate progress on that access test from 1 year to the next. It's very similar test to like the PSSA or Keystones for non-English learners that they take each year. The college and career measures, if you look over here, this one, of course, is blue. And as we've discussed before with the college and career measures, there's certain requirements that in a band of multiple years, students have to provide kind of portfolio and evidence of meeting needs of college and career measures throughout their schooling. So here's an overview. As I alluded to, kind of documented and Mrs. Campbell shared in the superintendent's report, this is really kind of intended to be an overview of each school. So what we kind of are doing here is kind of pushing it all together and saying, okay, what's this telling us if we kind of look at each school? Because there isn't a district page. There's a district page that just provides you with school data. It does not provide you with some of the performance information, all the performance information that's in each of the school Future Ready Index pages. So if we're looking at this, what are we taking away from it? This is an important slide. So the takeaways that the district has is we are on target for meeting 2030 proficiency goals in ELA, math, and science for the most part. Which is good. So overall proficiency data on our standardized testing, the students are performing. So in other words, either green or blue is a lot of what we're seeing overall if you go through and you kind of summarize and try to pull it together and make meaning of it all. Another success is overall attendance and graduation rate is good overall. Moving on to the areas of growth, which is important for us as an organization to always look to see how can we improve, what are areas that we need to improve upon, what are the factors that go into that, and how will that be achieved. One key concern that we have is growth in ELA and math. We talk specifically about, I mentioned the PVOS system. We've done pulled extensive data and reports on the PVOS system. We continue to do so. It'll be an ongoing approach that we're looking at it, not just at the building level, but we can also pull district reports in that particular in that system, and that's something that is ongoing, and we'll continue to look at that as we work towards continuous improvement. And then historically underachieving subgroups. Our IEP subgroup, economic disadvantage subgroup, English learners, they're historically underachieving, and it's not an East Penn issue. It's a state issue, national issue, and we know that although this is not just an East Penn thing, it's not okay, and so there's achievement gaps there based on compared to our overall student group, and so closing those gaps is important to us, and we'll continue to monitor that and look at, all right, if demographics are changing, we're looking at multiple measures of data, including demographic data. How are we meeting the needs of those students? What are we doing to individualize the instruction that is needed and meet the needs for all students? And so that's an ongoing goal for us. So what are we doing then to kind of improve and take a look at that and move forward? A lot of the great initiatives that we have in place are kind of targeting some of the needs that we have, which is great. For example, we're continuing to support Ready Math. It's only year 2 of that initiative, and more importantly than just for me anyway, and I think our leadership team, it's really not about just buying a resource and putting it in front of a student and say, okay, we should now improve. It's really about the professional development and the instructional practices that go with that resource, that our leaders, teacher leaders and administrative leaders in the district, what are we doing to make sure we're meeting the needs of our learners? What are we doing to provide the professional development that's needed that aligns with this new resource that gets us where we need to be? And so we're very confident the resource is the right match for us. And so now it's about, okay, continuing to provide professional development because it's new and you have the implementation phases as you move in a new resource, and the professional development that aligns with that, and we're optimistic that we'll see change, positive change, as we continue to use Ready Math. We also just started implementing literacy resources. You know, the PA Future Ready Index, of course, is based a lot on standardized tests, and standardized tests start in 3rd grade. We've started implementation of literacy resources. Really, the major funding that this board approved was really for kindergarten. And then last year we started with grades 1 and 2. And so if that initiative continues, we continue to implement those resources. And again, can't say enough, the professional development that is aligned with those resources that would improve the instructional practices in the classroom, which we find is most important. And the resources are very helpful because we know that those resources are aligned with the eligible content and the assessments that they're taking, not just standardized testing, but we know what we know is important in understanding and improving in the area of literacy. And so the resources married with the professional development will hopefully get us to where we are. And so we're excited to see the results of that. Last year, we were fortunate to be able to move for various reasons, but to keep this very simple, we were with Title I, our at the elementary level, we moved to school-wide Title I, meaning every kid in our Title I schools is now a Title I student. Without getting into all the details and the weeds of that, the bottom line is one of the requirements is creating school-wide plans. So with that, last year we started creating school-wide plans, comprehensive plans that started with rigorous data analysis to get down to root causes of needs. Then from there, you answer a series of guiding questions that leads you to what your goals should be in each building. And so instead of just the 5 elementary buildings going to school-wide action plans, we actually had all 7 go to plans just to be consistent there. And so with that, you do a full data review at the building level with the building team. So there's support with that team. There's also representation from the central office team. So what we've done is then use that data to drive questions that are sometimes very difficult to answer, to then create goals and then strategies to implement those goals. And last but most important, then what professional development and steps are you going to go through in order to meet the goals that have been established through that process? And that took us from November of last year through May. So it was an ongoing process to create school-wide plans. And what we see in the data this year, which of course is always lagging, is some of the data that we saw and some of the where we're headed. Those plans get updated throughout the year. So we will continue to look at those, update them with the new data that comes out, and continue to work towards improvement. Implementing a revised curriculum in ELA and social studies in 6th grade through 12th grade. So what's important here is moving towards ELA, which that was just approved by the board. Curriculum revisions there, which really more skill-based teaching of literacy, as opposed to teaching a novel or kind of the old school read a book and you're going to get questions about a book. But here it's really about implementing skills and understanding how to infer and read to learn, and getting into the rigorous understanding of how to use text and analyze text to make meaning and author's purpose, and on and on and on, about the importance of a lot of those skills and not just about the book itself. And so we feel with a lot of with these initiatives and many more, we have several committees as well that are working on areas that we feel we want to improve, but we also want to celebrate those things that are successful as well. Okay, thank you. So that was just kind of a general overview of what we're doing. With Future Ready PA Index and a lot of this data, you can really get into some very, into the weeds with a lot of detail. So we're happy to answer any questions. We may have to come back with some of the detailed questions. So if you want to do that, we're happy to come back. If you have some general questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Mr. Smith?
Well, thanks for your presentation. I think when it comes to, now that we're a year into Future Ready, I mean, looking back at what PVOS was, that this is certainly much, much better in terms of communicating progress to the community and kind of mitigating for some of the factors that students face that may may not be reflected in the classroom. But you talked about one of the challenges of and so it's not perfect, but so one of the challenges of Future Ready is that, and you mentioned this, is that it's still only from year to year, and you talked about how you go back in time and you have a lot of data to support that. I was curious if there were, as part of your data analysis conversations at the building level and the district level, in looking back at those several years' worth of data, there are going to be times when there is a figurative, rock chucked into the pond that causes a ripple effect, whether it's the publisher of the test changing or the complexity of the tests becoming more literacy-based, or the way in which the students take the test could change. Now that we're one-to-one, if they were all to let's say, begin taking the tests on their computers and moving away from paper and pencil, all of those things are potentially disruptive events that could, impact our scores. I'm wondering if are those part of your questions or part of your discussions at all? And the second part of my question is the other challenge with Future Ready and being 1 year to the next. It's never looking really longitudinally. It's not following a cohort from second to third. Well, I guess you can measure second to third. It's also not following third to fourth, fourth to fifth. So each new crop of kids, each new cohort that comes through, brings with it its own set of characteristics that, for good, bad, or otherwise, make sometimes interpreting the data a little bit of a challenge. So again, without getting too far into the weeds, I was wondering how much those particular factors are part of your conversations.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start with the last one. We do pull cohort data and look at cohort data. So we pull on a spreadsheet, you can kind of look diagonally, so it's kind of nice and easy to read, where you can see the cohort of students as they move through the grade levels, because we found, as you pointed out, that's much more valuable. Yes, we do that. And then when we're looking at the building level and the district level, the variables, there's so many variables, we're talking about students here, and we implement so many different things, and there's a different group of students from year to year, possibly implementing different resources, different teachers, different demographics, and there's all these different pieces. And so, yes, we look at all those pieces. What we try to do is say, okay, what's the level of impact of these different variables? Is that something we need to discuss? And we do the best we can with looking and evaluating a system where you're talking about kids to say, okay, what has the most impact? Which variables have the most impact? And where, over the course of this longitudinal data, can we say, we have enough evidence to say, we're kind of concerned, and there's something here that has to be changed. And then sometimes there's some really good news, and it's kind of up and down, and we have to kind of look through the variables and say, is this something to celebrate, or is maybe there's some things that are out of our control that are happening? And so the answer, I think the simple answer is yes. We consistently look at those variables. It's very difficult, and try to determine how much of an impact is that. But at the same time, we don't want to sit back and just kind of say, well, there's so many things changing, so there's nothing we can do.
Right. So I think it's important that the community understands that even though we have these hard numbers and this data that is being crunched, even after you do all of that, there are all these variables that you may not have evidence to support, whether that change in publisher, again, for example, whether it rose to a level of import that it did affect your data or whether it didn't. So a lot of times it does come down to that discussion behind the scenes as to what those numbers actually mean. So despite the state's best efforts in trying to put together something that does exactly perfectly measure what's happening in our classrooms on a day-to-day basis, it's not always as easy.
I agree, and just a point to kind of solidify your comments, we also don't pull the fire alarm as soon as we get one piece of data that's like, oh no, look at this. It's like we have to change right away because of that point. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
Yeah, I have two questions, maybe a third. Can you just explain to me, they had some measures in here, industry-based learning and advanced on industry-based competency, and I noticed that we were below the benchmarks, but I'm also thinking at it, a lot of those kids are not going up to LCTI, they're not taking the NOCTI test, so they're not going to be exposed to that. So what are they trying to get at here, and what is it meaningful at all in the context of I understand the kids that go to LCTI are getting exposed to all that, and those that are staying here are not necessarily going to get that same, competency metric or measurement that they get when they take the NOCTI. And I guess that's kind of what I'm seeing they're trying to get at here, but I'm not 100% sure.
The NOCTI's included in, so it would really just be your students focused on industry that were taking those tests. So the NOCTI's included in that.
Yeah, I understand that, but what are they trying to tell us with this? I mean, they're setting a statewide performance measure, but if we only have a fraction of are they only measuring the kids that go to?
Yeah, yes,
career and technical?
Correct. So only the industry-based students only.
Okay.
It's not a student that's here that's not
All right, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Yes, no. It's just that sample size of students that they're telling us how those students are performing.
Okay, and I noticed that we're still quite below the state averages, but I'm not too concerned about that because I know what the initiatives are at LCTI to bring the students up in terms of their NOCTI, competency. And then the other question I had to do with rigorous courses of study.
Mm-hmm.
What are they trying to tell because I'm thinking of it from the standpoint of, if a parent picks up this information and they look at it and they kind of go, I'm comparing Parkland versus East Penn versus Southern Lehigh, how do you got all this information, and if you look at just the arrows down, the left, performance under the state standards, you kind of go, well, this isn't a very good institution. You could make that, assessment. But on the other hand, we know better. Is there a way to kind of make sure that we don't, get a black eye because of maybe incomplete data or data that, like you said, represents only 1 year?
Right. So I can just answer just for us here at East Penn. Basically, that's what that does. It shows kind of the number of AP classes and dual enrollment classes for us. And so this is something we will continue to look at to see, okay, are we in the future going to look to add more dual enrollment or AP classes? So that's something we'll continue to monitor. At this point, the data is what the data is on the AP tests that are offered and the dual enrollment classes, and also, and the NT exams as well. So that's what it pulls and that's what it's showing. So a combination of those three factors, we've already looked at that, and that's something we'll continue to evaluate and look at.
But is there a way to kind of put maybe a better face on what's here so that we're not looked upon as having a sub-performing district or high school? Is this something or is there really nothing more we can do because this is what it is? And so if somebody only goes and looks at this, they're not going to really know the whole story.
Yeah, so the positive spin would be we substantially added, we've added a substantial.
I'm not talking about just in advanced placement. I'm talking about in general with what you see on this, scorecard versus what we know is maybe more reality about how this district is performing or how the high school is performing. So how do you kind of take and counter what the state is saying and saying, yeah, we've got some issues here, but, oh, by the way, there's more to the story. And how are we getting that message out?
Yeah, I think we get that message out in various ways of all the great things that we're doing. We try to use social media. We push out all the positive things that are going on in here. We continue to be innovative in the courses that we offer. We try to offer a rigorous program of studies, and we've increased drastically the amount of AP classes we've offered just a few years ago. And so we continue to improve our programming, and we continue to work. And so hopefully that message gets out through all the good things that are going on aside of just the standardized testing and some of these measures.
Okay.
Mr. Jankowski?
On page 7 of the slides, can you kind of discern for me what the difference is between the percent proficient advanced versus the academic growth expectation? Because just looking at this example in math, where we're above a target, doing well in growth expectations, but we dropped, and we're downward arrow with respect to percent proficient. What are those judging that there would be that distinction where you could be viewed as doing very well in growth, but downward trending in proficiency?
Okay, so it's a great question. And if actually on the sorry, Mrs. Campbell, I'm not going to laser it here. So down in this area on the actual site, if you click there, it drills down and goes deeper, okay? But just to generally, so achievement is simply, are students going in and scoring at the proficient range? Are they meeting the cut scores of proficiency? And we'll use ELA as the example in ELA. What percent are proficient on the test? Then the growth measures are looking at from year to year, are students performing based on a metrics that's used? Are they performing where they should be as far as growth? Are they making 1 year's growth in 1 year's time or more? So regardless of if they're an advanced student and every single year they far exceed the proficiency cut score for the test, are they growing? That's the next step. So growth, so if you're proficient every single year, but you really are coming down in your proficiency and you're not improving, you're still proficient. And so on the percentage there, you would show as proficient in achievement. Growth is going to look at, okay, regardless of the proficiency level, whether you're below basic or you're advanced, are you growing each year, year to year? So that's the difference between the two.
Okay.
So you can see drastically, you can see a blue, school that's blue for proficiency on ELA assessments, but they could be red in growth. What that would tell you is that school is performing very, very well on the PSSA. Kids are coming in and they're proficient, but they're not growing from year to year. They're just staying where they were before.
Okay, that's helpful. One of the things I like hearing is about, the district initiatives based on this, particularly the school-wide plans, because one of my concerns would be, you have one school that's doing well, a particular grade level in math or ELA, another school is doing poorly, and you can discern whether or not it's actually how the course is being taught versus all the students struggling in a certain grade level with one subject, that it may be the curriculum itself that is an issue. So it's nice to hear that we're using this data to address that and to see how year over year we can see if the students are, if it is maybe that grade level, that school, that demographic that may be at issue versus curriculum. So
yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what we do.
Ms. Lynch?
I really enjoyed looking at this yesterday, and I was playing with all the buttons, only getting into the weeds with it. But one of the things I keep thinking about is these historically underachieving subgroups.
Mm-hmm.
And are we using this as a tool to reallocate money in an equitable way?
When you say reallocate money,
Or
I'm not sure
allocate,
what you mean.
maybe not reallocate, but when you're allocating resources in general, maybe not money, but resources in general, are we using this tool to equitably help those subgroups?
Yes, so when we look at that data, we have a process where we look at each building, we look at students and their achievement and what they need. So interventions that are needed, making sure we have the appropriate interventions and instruction and kind of differentiating to meet the needs of those students so that they do have equitable access to instruction and technology and the appropriate interventions needed to kind of close the gap.
Okay. And there was another question I wanted to ask. I just wanted to say thank you very much for focusing 3 out of the 4 of the initiatives are K to 5 predominantly, and being a procrastinator. I really like that we start with a little list of minds and just build them up. And I wanted to also congratulate you on, I was looking at East Penn's the Emmaus High School, and I was really worried about the Pennsylvania State assessments when it came to science, where it particularly indicated that Black, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, and kids with disabilities were all red arrows going down. But when it went into making those gains, everybody was up in blue. And I just wanted to congratulate you. You guys are obviously doing what you need to be doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I
Ms.
just
Bowman?
had something I missed while you were doing the presentation. Thank you very much. It answered a lot of questions for me. I was kind of massively confused by this data. The historically underachieving groups, you said which groups they were, and the English learners was one, and who were the other groups?
Economically disadvantaged and the IEP subgroup.
Okay. And then we are using the building-wide plans to try to address that group that is not performing at the same pace as the other groups. Is that right? Or is that a separate thing?
It's a separate thing. So, but each of the elementary buildings will focus on whatever needs present themselves at that building level.
It doesn't really need to be during this meeting, but I would be curious to know what for those specific groups is happening, like beyond, I'm aware of all the curriculum changes and that you mentioned, but other than for the one for English language learners, it didn't seem like those specifically address these groups of kids. And so I was just curious what we're thinking in terms of how do we level the playing field for those kids so that, the opportunities are here, but how do we help them use those opportunities?
Right. That's a great question, and it's for those subgroups of kids, they traditionally underperform, and so it's a challenge that's not just an East Penn challenge. So we continually work to provide the right resources, the right staffing, the right interventions and instruction to meet the needs of all learners. And so we continually work on that, and we know that that's an uphill battle, but we feel like we have some things in place, a vision and a plan, and that we can slowly start to chip away at that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Dr. Munson?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions and comments that are more at 30,000 feet. This related to some of the previous inquiries. So, I mean, I guess the first is, do you and does the East Penn team feel like the Pennsylvania Future Ready Index, as it is produced by the state, is an accurate and useful way to measure how we're doing in our district, and as a result, use it to make future plans?
I think the holistic approach, compared to what the SPP score was before, is a better approach to overall kind of see more than just standardized testing. And so I think it's more helpful. But as we mentioned before, we do dig, as a school team, as you mentioned, we really dig into a lot of other data pieces in addition to this, and really drill a little bit deeper to make sure we're getting to root causes of kind of concerns, and really making sure we're celebrating what we should be celebrating as well. So I know I didn't directly answer a question. I do think it's helpful. Yes, it's a better tool than was there before, but we use multiple measures to analyze data and produce our goals. Does that make sense?
It does. And I mean, the point that Mr. Champagne made earlier, I think is an important one about sort of public perceptions and public relations. But setting that aside for a second, I mean, to say that it's better than this other really bad measure is not a ringing endorsement. I mean, so why? So we've spent a fair bit of time on this, and you and your team have clearly spent, an unbelievable amount of time on just this, much less the several other measures that you mentioned. So just as a for example, why not, if you have cohort information that you think is more useful than this?
Yes.
Or if maybe 3-year moving averages are more useful than this, or whatever it is that you and the team think is more useful, why do we focus so much time on this if it's not as good as these other things that you also have data on and you are already using to make decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is the public this is what's out there, the public. This is what gets released to the community. And so we feel it's important to communicate and make sure people know how to use this tool, because that's what's out there. And nobody else is going to really have access to some of the things, just like any organization. When we're drilling into into the weeds of the data and the complicated numbers and things like that we're going through, that's kind of our team uses to assess and figure out how we're going to move towards improvement. That's something that can come forward in the future. That's a long, complicated conversation, but it's something that we can, to help, like you had said, kind of show some of the more successes that we want to show.
Right. I mean, that's great. And I know you have lots of multiple measures, but as a sort of contrarian, I do worry a lot about how, we end up, even with the best of intentions, we end up conforming our initiatives and our focus on the things that we have metrics for, detriment of the things that we don't. And I know you and everyone here is aware of that, but it's one of the reasons why I'm always a little nervous when I see these kinds of presentations, because it's one thing to say, well, we're aware that these things aren't happening. I mean, I guess I'm actually worried about the opposite thing than Ms. Winch. I'm not worried that you're using this tool to make changes. I'm worried that you're using it too much. And I mean, just as a for example, I am deeply concerned about the low levels at which our population, but particularly our young people writ large, can differentiate between an opinion and a fact. Which is something that we actually talked about when we were talking about the social studies revisions. None of that is here, right?
True.
I would happily trade more proficiency in that with proficiency in Algebra 1, which is listed here. Like if we don't want to have to make a choice, but if I had to make a choice, that's the choice I would make. And I think it would be better for the community. And so I just hope that the group continues to take that into account when sort of deciding sort of how much effort to put into chasing improvements in these metrics, which we have little control over.
No, I appreciate that. And that was kind of the point I was trying to make when you asked me directly, do you think this tool is useful? It was kind of like, to a point. Yeah. So thank you. Agreed.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very helpful to understand the charts and understand what's behind them. Okay. Moving on to the district update, Mrs. Campbell.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to start off by recognizing several staffers from the EHS Stinger who once again received national recognition at the National Scholastic Press Association Fall Conference, which happened again just this past November. We actually had 24 staff members from the EHS Stinger, which is pretty incredible, who were able to attend the NSPA conference in Washington, D.C. For training, competition, as well as some sessions with some well-known journalism professionals. In addition, we had 6 of our students who earned national recognition in the NSPA write-off competition, which again is just a tremendous accomplishment for Emmaus High School students. In particular, those individuals who I'd like to recognize are Heather Fabrizi, Nate Garcia, Rylan Bassett, Emma Brashear, Kristen Heilman, and Aiden Springs. I'd also like to recognize Erin DeBauer. Erin DeBauer, I'm sorry, I botched that name up a little bit. Erin is an Emmaus High School sophomore and has been selected as a candidate for the LCTI National Technical Honor Society for the 2019-20 school year, which again is a tremendous accomplishment. Students who earn this honor are selected for the Honor Society through LCTI for having earned a minimum year-end GPA of a 90% or an A average, for all the classes that they've taken at LCTI, as well as their respective sending school from the previous year prior to their nomination. So that would be prior to this past year. In addition, other criteria that are included, which are perhaps equally or even more important as the student's grade, would be attendance, letters of recommendation, community service activities, so ways in which they've given back to the community, as well as student leadership. So again, another congratulations. We're very proud of Aaron. In addition, the Emmaus High School International Fair is scheduled for February 29th, 2020 from 11 to 2 p.m. So that is on a Saturday, and that will be held at our Emmaus High School cafeteria. So I just share that with the community to hopefully put that date on your calendars. Again, February 29th, 2020. Our East Penn community is invited to join us for food, games, and crafts from around the globe. And finally, the Use of Time Committee, which is a group of students, teachers, administrators at the building level, as well as district administration. This particular committee has formed at Emmaus High School as branching off of our committee at the district level that's been looking at secondary start times. So our Use of Time Committee at the high school has met once so far this year. They've met in November, and their goal really is just that, to take a real in-depth dive and investigation into how we use time at the secondary level. How does the current 9-period bell schedule meet student needs, meet teacher needs? What are parents' perceptions about that? And so as a next step, within the next 2 weeks, the Emmaus High School Use of Time Committee will be releasing a survey, and they'll be surveying EHS students, they will be surveying East Penn parents, and then also our Emmaus High School staff as well. And so I just mentioned that to the community to please watch for that survey. Again, your input is so very valuable, and this will really help us to have a more in-depth understanding of students, staff members, and parents' perception about the current high school schedule and how that's meeting our needs. And so certainly, as we then have some of that survey information, that information will then be used by the Use of Time Committee at the high school, and that information will then feed directly to our Start Time Committee at the district level. So stay tuned for more information regarding feedback from the surveys, as well as plans for moving ahead. And then a final note, in celebration of the holiday season, there really are a variety of vocal and instrumental music programs happening at all levels in all 10 of our buildings throughout the district. So I invite the community to join us in celebrating the holiday season by checking out and hopefully joining us for any of those performances. You can go to any of our school websites or the district website to check out the variety of concert times, dates, and locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Mrs. Campbell?
When are
Ms.
we,
Bowman.
the Start Time Committee and the Use of Time Committee, what is the trajectory, or do we know, like, of when we might see a presentation at the board or hear more information?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Our timeline would be that we would bring you an update in terms of what, if any, recommendations might be made to the high school schedule. We would have some information to bring back in the spring of 2020. So that would be this spring.
Okay. That's for both, or I just got confused?
Yes.
For both of them, okay. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Munson.
This is actually just a comment following on my last comment about standardized testing. And I was reminded of it because of your report that talks about the sort of nuances of the metrics we use, and the fact that our high school does not get credit for the Algebra 1 Keystone tests that are taken in the the middle schools. My rough measure of your table, that even in the last 5 years has gone up somewhere in the neighborhood of 15%. A 25% change, but over the last 5 years, and how many are doing it. And of course, those are some of the students that we have taking that test in middle school are among our strongest students on that exam, right? And so as you know, but not everyone who perhaps is interested in the goings-on in the district, we have to be careful how we interpret those numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other comments? Thank you for your report, Mrs. Campbell. Moving on to personnel items, I do have an update on the item 8. Ernesto Perez and Devra Raffeld, the transfers will be effective December 16th and not December 10th. And with that change, may I have a motion for the personnel items?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. If there's no objection, I'd like to take items A through H together in business operations. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion or comments? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion's pass. Next, I'd like a motion for the resolution not to exceed the Act 1 index.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
We're all happy.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next up is Dr. Levinson's motion on expansion of the senior citizen real estate tax rebate program. Would you like to offer a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Would you like to start the discussion?
Sure. If you'll all indulge me, I have about 8 to 10 minutes worth of comments to help motivate why I'm bringing this forward. I felt this was the appropriate time to start this discussion with budget season forthcoming. So one of the key benefits of talking with hundreds of constituents over the last year, and that's one of the campaigning, I suppose, has been to directly hear their questions and concerns about the district. For a good number of the property-owning senior citizens that I met, property taxes and their ability to afford to stay in their homes were at the forefront of their minds. As we know, our current system for funding our schools leans heavily on the property owner for roughly 2/3 of our budget. This form of funding is especially burdensome for those on fixed incomes, including senior citizens, the disabled, and so on. I share general frustration with the unsuccessful efforts of our legislators in Harrisburg to effect meaningful and robust property tax reform to change the school funding system to something more equitable. While there are many ideas under consideration, I feel that whatever is done will need to guarantee adequate funding for districts and to preserve local control, and proposals to date may not do a great job of meeting these criteria. As such, it is likely for the immediate future that any changes or reforms are going to be made while working with the current system and attempting to target relief to our most vulnerable groups of the population. To that end, without a definitive plan from the state level, school boards and administrations like ours and EPSD must work very hard to build fair and comprehensive budgets that meet the needs of the district while also being efficient and fiscally responsible. This is all in an effort to meet goals and objectives while not creating an undue burden on the taxpayer. Unfortunately, this does not leave many options for boards like ours to consider when we seek to help vulnerable groups, like those on fixed incomes. Through conversations with members of our community, my attention was directed to the EPSD Senior Citizen Real Estate Tax Rebate Program. In conjunction with the PA version, this program provides qualifying applicants, namely senior citizens and the permanently disabled, with a means to recoup some amount of property taxes paid. These rebates increase in importance if they represent a substantial fraction of people's incomes. It's important to note that there are various ways to provide property tax relief and to provide the biggest impact for vulnerable groups. Upon review of such methods, I found information on a study that looked at the impact of rebates and the authors found that rebates tended to provide the biggest impact to the vulnerable. So such programs like our rebate program are indeed helpful to the community. Briefly, the current EPSD and PA property tax rebate plans are structured as follows. For our district, we require owner-occupied principal residence within EPSD in which taxes are paid in full by the deadline. We do not include renters. Claimant eligibility includes age 65 or older, under the age of 65 with a spouse who is 65 or older, a widow or widower age 50 to 64, or permanently disabled age 18 to 64. The income calculation uses Form PA 1000 from the state and includes various income sources, including 50% of Social Security income, pension, retirement, or IRA income, interest and dividends, salaries, wages. This one was entering lottery and gambling winnings, public assistance, insurance benefits, among others. Income eligibility guidelines for our district rebate plan has 4 tiers. The first tier was below $10,000 of qualifying income, you get a maximum of $650. Between $10,000 and under $15,000, a maximum of $500. Between $15,000 and $20,000, a maximum of $250 rebate, and anything above $20,000, $0. The Pennsylvania plan, which, by the way, any applicant to EPSD is probably also applying for, has the identical eligibility requirements for property owners, but it also includes a benefit for renters. Same included items for income calculation, but this time they have 4 income eligibility tiers. 0 to 8,000 gives a maximum of $650. 8 to 15 gives a maximum of $500. 15 to 18, a maximum of $300. 18 to 35,000, maximum $250, and anything above $35,000 gets no rebate. So the PA plan is a bit more generous in that it includes a larger income bracket. For comparison, here's a sampling of some rebate plans from other districts. These indicate a wide range of rebate values and ways to disperse the rebate. Parkland is a little less generous than East Penn's. They have a 13-tiered prorated or sliding scale across applicable income range. Their maximum rebate is $500 between $0 and $5,500 of income, declining thereafter with no rebate after $15,000 in qualifying income. North Penn is also less generous, 0 to 8,000, maximum of $195. 8 to 15, $150, 15 to 18, $90, 18 to 35, $75, and nothing over $35. East Stroudsburg is a more generous plan. Again, have the same income tiers that Pennsylvania has, but its maximum benefit is $1,500, followed by $1,150, $700, and $575, and then again 0 for anything that's greater than $35,000. Pine Richland School District is the exact same plan as the PA plan. So with this information, and as part of my due diligence to understand the size and scope of EPSD's rate program, I found out that the current district rebate program, based on 5 years of data provided me by the business office, costs less than 1/10% of the overall district budget for roughly 200 to 300 qualifying applicants. The cost and number of these qualifying applicants apparently have declined somewhat over the last 5 years. This is not a large expense, certainly compared to the scale of the district's budget, but it is an impactful accommodation for those who need relief. I must admit that I found the overall magnitude of this program surprisingly smaller than I had originally thought. I would have expected more qualifying applicants to the program. This low number could indicate a general lack of need among our residential population, or perhaps it is a sign that the qualifying income thresholds are too low, or maybe there is a general lack of awareness of the rebate program itself. Studying this program further is my understanding that this rebate program has not been updated or reevaluated in many years. And going back through the archives, which are kindly posted on our district site, the current plan was adopted in June 2007. So it's been 12 and a half years since this plan has been put in effect. EPSD, per Mr. Ballard, it's one of the first, if not the first, district to offer rebates in tandem with the PA rebate program. Given its age, the original structure, our rebate program may not be, given its age, the original structure of our rebate program may not be providing the benefits originally intended, as fixed incomes versus economic realities have changed over time. So for me, this begs the question if it needs to be evaluated for expansion. The cost of any expansion to this rebate program would need to be taken into account, of course. To that end, cost calculations require a careful estimate of the number of residents who may qualify at each income bracket, which will likely have some degree of uncertainty. Expansion of the program could come in the form of boosts to rebate levels at each tier, realigning the brackets upward for a given dollar amount, widening the maximum income bracket tier, adding another tier after the current last bracket, and so on. In that regard, if we wanted to take a more conservative approach to expansion, given the inherent uncertainties and understanding values, we could expand in stages. For example, increase the maximum qualifying income bracket incrementally from year to year, or in the first year anyway, so that we would not be burdened with something too large in any given year. So I'm not going to prescribe an exact plan at this point, as we do not have sufficient data to do so. On that note, the administration will need to conduct a study in order to determine the scope of such an expansion so as to ensure that its rollout is fiscally responsible. I readily acknowledge that collecting meaningful demographic and income data will likely be a challenge. Potential sources of information could be from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, and I do wonder whether, since EPSD applicants will also be filling out the Pennsylvania form, whether the state could provide that information that goes with the PA rebate plan, and then maybe we can get direct numbers at each income tier, and then we can get a pretty good estimate of what's going on inside our district. There may be other tax records available. We may get data from local municipal taxing authorities, social welfare statistics, etc. So any uncertainty in an implemented plan could be managed with an incremental rollout, as I suggested before, to allow for managing the cost. So let me be clear, this is not a call for reducing existing rebates. A call to review our current rebate program and to potentially update and expand the plan to ensure that we are providing accommodation to those most in need and meeting the intent of the program. I certainly don't expect this to happen, but if our discussion morphs into a call to reduce these benefits, I'm not going to be in favor of that. Please note that if we do move forward with an expansion, I'm hoping that it is possible, again, in the context of the budget formulation, that we can find a way to offset its added cost through offsetting maneuvers from other areas of the budget. In conclusion, I'm approaching this expansion with an open mind, and I'm looking for both myself and this board to make a decision on an expansion of the income eligibility guidelines in the district-based property tax rebate program. In other words, whether it is something that we can support and afford in the context of our existing budget framework. I feel we owe this to our most vulnerable groups of taxpayers in the district, and with that, I appreciate you listening, and I look forward to your comments and a subsequent positive vote on this motion.
Thank you. Do you want to share the information on the administration?
Sure. Yes, so the board has some context. There is some limited information available, and I'll wait until everybody receives this handout, and then I'll briefly highlight it, because it's pretty easy to quickly see this. At the top, you can see the income brackets, which were highlighted by Dr. Levinson. On the left, you can see the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania eligibility guidelines, and on the right, you can see East Penn School District's eligibility guidelines. On the bottom, you can see 2017, which was the most recent data set available from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue that I recently became aware of. And you can see in the income brackets the number of applicants that were approved, as well as the related amount. And on the right, you can see East Penn School District for the same year, the number of applicants in each bracket and the related amount. So for instance, if you look at the bottom bracket, you can see that the Commonwealth had 68 applicants, and the school district had 67 applicants, so it's very close. There you start to get a little bit of skew because the brackets don't line up exactly. But this will give you a sense of the magnitude then. For instance, if the district were to mirror a state plan, the state plan, what that would look like. So I thought that may be helpful in terms of sort of giving some context to numbers for the discussion.
I think it's interesting if you look at trying to align things if you add up the 0 to 15,000 for the state, it's much higher than the 0 to 15,000 for the district. If otherwise the eligibility levels are all the same, it looks like it's a lack of awareness of the district.
I do have a question too. Is this for property owners or renters?
So the data on the left is just property owners. It doesn't include,
Okay,
yes.
because again, the PA plan does include renters as well, so this
For
excludes
the lower
renters.
values.
The data that was available separated those.
Okay.
So, yeah, so this is sort of as best as possible, an apple to an apple, if you will.
So in that regard, Dr. Bacher's comment, at least for this middle bracket, appears to be a lack of awareness amongst those individuals.
And even the next one, 15 to 18, has more people from the state than 15 to 20 for the district. So it looks like that's a systematic issue, that more people are applying for the state program than the district. There comments? Dr. Munson?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Levinson, for all the hard work that you put into this. I found the handouts that you sent ahead of this meeting really useful. You've done an enormous amount of research, and it helped educate me about this. Another thing that I actually appreciate about this resolution is that it offloads all the hard work on Mr. Saul. But I mean, more seriously, that it's worded in such a way that this can be fit into the larger budgetary framework rather than just being a sort of dictate that you have to work around.
Sure.
And so, I think that this is a superb idea. The number of levers that we have to provide relief to vulnerable populations is pretty small. And so we should take more advantage of those that we have. And I think this is a good start.
Mr. Smith?
I'd like to echo those comments. Dr. Levinson, what you've put together here is very admirable in the amount of work that you've put in to present all this to us. And in listening to you talk about your thoughts behind this and the genesis of it, it made me think of Mr. Ballard's parting thoughts to us as he left. And it was, the gist of it was that we have many different constituents that we serve, and that we need to take a balanced approach in considering the needs and the opinions of all of those constituents. And I imagined that you had many wonderful conversations as you were out campaigning with some of these folks. But I also imagine that you had some pretty difficult ones as well. But I think one of the easiest things to do in having these conversations is to approach all of them with good faith. And that is certainly something that is plainly obvious that you have done. So I wholeheartedly support the idea of taking a deeper look at this to really find ways, again, in one of the limited amount of tools that we have to support a segment of the population, one of our constituents that does not have currently a direct voice on the board, and the fact that we are open to, and that you specifically are open to listening to those opinions is, as I said, admirable, and I look forward to seeing where the conversation goes. Thank you.
Mr. Jankowski?
I will also echo what Dr. Munson and Mr. Smith said. I really appreciate you taking this effort. I think this is an important issue that needs to be addressed. Looking at the numbers, both in what you prepared for us as well as what Mr. Saul just prepared, it'd be interesting to be able to find, however we're able to do so, information to determine who these individuals are and the reasoning for their failure to apply for these rebates. I mean, looking at Dr. Levinson's information, there seems to be, during the last 2 years, a substantial drop-off in the number of applicants. The first 3 years of this 5-year period was kind of static, and then, like I said, in all three categories, there was a pretty sizable drop-off, and to determine what the rationale was for that. And then also in what Mr. Saul prepared for us, to find out who are these individuals in these levels, the 0 to 15,000, because again, like you said, obviously there's a lack of information, and how can we reach these individuals to make them aware that the school district, who are they? What are the demographics so that, we can make this, bring better awareness to what the school district has, even now, in addition to what the future we may present to them. So those are my thoughts, and again, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Other comments? Mrs. Bell?
I think this is a great thing to look into. I too had some conversations during campaigning, and one extremely memorable one with actually my neighbor who was 90, who I'd never talked to before, and was worried about losing his house because he couldn't pay his taxes. And those are the things that really break your heart. So I'm definitely in favor of this. I do have a question is there a cost to us studying this, or is this just Mr. Saul crunching numbers and looking for information? What does this involve?
I haven't formulated a plan yet. Okay. My initial thought is to actually reach out to Senator Brown's office to see if he can provide support, his staff can provide support with reaching out to the Department of Revenue, because I doubt that my reaching out to them directly is going to be successful. However, I know that legislatively, often they have access to data sets that we don't otherwise have access to, that could be very useful, as Dr. Levinson had suggested. So that will probably be my first course of action, is just see if we can get support, for instance, in that method.
That sounds great. And just a quick follow-up. I'm also wondering, and I'm not necessarily trying to expand the scope, but I am curious if our max rebates are enough for certain people. So if that's something that we could look into at the same time, somebody who only has $8,000 of income, but only getting a $650 rebate on a house that they might, I don't know what their tax, but maybe that is more than enough. But my question is just, could we look at that too if this hasn't been updated in many years? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
I offer this because I happen to stand next to the Lower Macungie tax administrator. I can't think of her name right off the top.
Mrs. Vacileros?
Yeah, she offered support where she could provide it, and also that Ryan McKenzie's office, she felt would be very supportive of trying to get the information that you might need. So I offer that, and I'm very much in favor of what Dr. Levinson has proposed here. So.
One comment, I think I'm very happy that Dr. Levinson put the effort in putting this program together and giving us great information. I think it'll be a win-win for the district. I think also one comment that we didn't bring up, the state rebate program has a renter value in it. Any comment on that, Mr. Saul? Have we ever looked at that in the district?
This program has not been looked at in the 3 years that I've been here. So prior to that, I can't comment on that, but in the past 3 years, no, it has not.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Winch?
I just wanted to echo everybody's obvious thankfulness of the most vulnerable citizens and residents in our district. And I just wanted to share, I work at Lower Macungie Community Center part-time in the evening, and I work with a security guard that was really worried about losing his home. He's permanently disabled and can only work a few hours a week in order to support himself without losing any of his benefits. And so I looked at the website and said, I wonder if I can maybe I can sign you up for this program. He had no idea about it. And then I was embarrassed that we were only giving him this much of a break. So I firmly believe that we can find ways to do things to help these people that need to buy food for themselves, provide medicine for themselves and their families, and to keep them in their homes. So thank you.
Okay, I'd also like to thank Dr. Levinson for taking lead on this. I think it's important that we keep the program up to date to address the people most in need in our district. I do want to caution, I put on my engineer's hat and did a normal fit to the limited data that we had. And it appears even with our perhaps more limited availability, or not availability, but knowledge of our program, that significant expansion of the dollar range, even without changing the value at each range, could be quite expensive similarly. So I appreciate your thought of, maybe taking this in steps and going slow, especially after seeing this data that perhaps there's a very significant fraction of people that even if we didn't change our eligibility levels and just got the word out, there might be significant more use of our program. And again, that's just a larger offset that we need to consider in the budget. So I appreciate it, and it sounds like the board is very supportive of this effort. Any other discussion or comments? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Winch.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next is Educational Conference. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Winch.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next up is the third reading and adoption of our policy. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
At the second reading, we had no updates, so I'll just take by exception. Are there any questions or concerns? Then Ms. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Winch.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next is report on CLIU. Ms. Bowman.
Yes. So at the November meeting, we had a presentation of the preliminary 2021 operating budget. The big news for us is that there's no increases to the district percentages, which has been the case for the CLIU for the past 11 years. We'll be approving this final budget in December. I don't know if these numbers are going to stay the same in December, but the last numbers that I got were the operating budget is 3.1 million. It's going to increase by about 75,000, all because of salary and benefits increases. We at East Penn, sorry, I wrote down the number wrong here. The school district's percentages, all of them combined, pay about 820,000 of that, and East Penn's portion is about 144,000 of that. That's about 8,000 more than the year before, but it's not due to an increased percentage. It's just apparently one more student or something, or it doesn't seem like that's a full student. But anyway, that's that. And then we also approved the lease that I mentioned before. It's a 10-year lease at Interchange Road for a new space that they're actually going to save money on. So, and we're going to have a basket raffle at the next meeting. I'm excited. That's it.
Are there any questions or comments for Ms. Bowman? Thank you for your report. Next up is the report on LCTI.
Yes.
Mr.
Thank
Champagne?
you, Mr. Bacher. There were actually two meetings. There was the Committee of the Whole, and in that meeting, we had a report out by the auditor, and I want to note that we had a clean, unmodified opinion for the 27th consecutive year at LCTI, as well as no material weaknesses identified for the 30th consecutive year. We also had a preliminary look at the budget for the next school year, 2021. It does show a slight increase in the contributions from the member sending districts. However, there was a substantial discussion on that matter, and the business manager and her team are taking a look at that, and will be giving us another view of the budget at the December meeting. We are also expected to get back in our January payment from LCTI about $41,000 as a rebate to the district. Mr. Saul was briefed on this, I think, in advance of our meeting, so he's well aware of that and has the budget. So I will look to provide any additional information as we have our next meeting on Wednesday. In addition, we had a special meeting that evening to approve the new teacher's contract. It is a 4-year agreement. It's something that has been lacking up there for quite some time in terms of wage scales compared to the districts that are sending students up there, as well as just being competitive with the increased unemployment rate, especially in the fields that LCTI is really working to advance. It's just very difficult to attract and then retain good staff. So while it is an additional cost, the business manager and Dr. Rushton will be looking to offset the impact of that. But it was very well received by the teachers at LCTI. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Champagne? Or any additional comments? Thank you for your report. Next on the agenda is appointment of LCTI JOC members. I haven't heard any requests to withdraw from their positions or requests from other people to join the board. So we have a motion now. Are there any any members whose terms are expiring that does not want to be reseated for an additional term? No? Then may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
So this is to reappoint Alan Bird, Josh Levinson, and Adam Smith for an additional term as representatives of our board at LCTI. Any discussion or comment? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next on legislative, upon Mr. Ballard's retirement from the board, I've asked Mr. Jankowski if he would like to be our PSBA liaison and report on legislative matters, and he has agreed. And so he will be making reports in this section in the future. I just wanted to publicly thank him for stepping up on this, for these services. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Announcements. We had an executive session before this meeting at 6:30 to discuss real estate and negotiations. The next regularly scheduled board meeting is on Monday, January 13th, here at 7:30, and the district will be closed for winter break from December 23rd through January 1st. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.